From my understanding, Guru Nanak Dev Ji opposed materialistic and physical objects that represent religion, like Janeyu. How do you think the 5 kakars are different from other religious article of faith?
So the question is, Guru Nanak Dev Ji seems to oppose religious symbols like the ones from various traditions of the time. Why do we wear the 5Ks? What is the significance of those within the Sikh tradition? The question is rooted around the idea that there must be something special about our religious symbols. Maybe all the other ones from all the other traditions are wrong, but surely our one is right. But Guru Nanak's wisdom is, always was, and always has been for the whole of humanity. Whether you wear the religious symbols or not, the wisdom is applicable to you. So the question is not around whether Guru Nanak opposed those religious symbols or not. The question is, despite the ultimate truth that regardless of what religious clothing you wear, there is a higher way to live, and that is what you're being measured against. Are you living up to the standards that the Guru has laid out, regardless of the religious symbols? So that's not the question. The question is, do the religious symbols have any meaning at all? Do they have any symbolism? Do they have any impact on our spiritual path? And for that, we really need to think about other forms of symbolism and other things in our life where we also do something similar. When my eldest son was about 11 years old, he was enrolled into the local junior army cadets. So he was about 11 at the time. And what was very interesting for a young boy to go through was this transformation as he started to become more involved with his local army group. And we as parents, we saw it. I saw very quickly his attitude towards life change, his attitude towards himself change. Now I'm sure that's because of the values that his army training was instilling in him. But you would see some immediate effect on the days of the week where he had to go and put his army uniform on. And the way he walked changed, the way he stood changed, his mannerisms changed. And that got me to understand a little bit about why religious masters sometimes give you a new identity, a new form, because it becomes not just a symbol for the world, it becomes a reminder for yourself. First and foremost, these religious symbols are for you. They are reminders for you. They are for you to ask yourself, am I living up to the highest ideals? When my son puts on his army uniform, he's no longer just representing himself. He's no longer just representing his family. He represents a greater organization that stands for something. And so he knows that he's part of that bigger picture. And when I saw that in my son, it made me understand a little bit more about what we do in spiritual traditions or religious traditions. But having said that, the uniform alone means nothing if you yourself don't have those values within you. So values come first. The symbolism comes after that. Guru Nanak Dev Ji didn't come and say, I have a hugely beneficial wisdom to teach you, but before I teach you, you need to wear this. He didn't do it that way around, did he? He taught us the wisdom first. He said, go try this, live this, practice this. And those who lived it enough decided that this is something that I want to dedicate my life towards. What we've unfortunately made the mistake of doing now, what we've done is we now judge people on the symbolism and not on the values. We look at you and we look at others and we say, oh, you're not as good at practicing your faith as I am, because look, I wear more of the stuff. Or you're not doing all the religious protocol, I'm doing more of that. We even judge ourselves on how much religious stuff we do. Are we waking up at the right time? Are we doing this? Are we wearing this? Are we saying all the right words? But none of those things are what the masters really came to teach you. They came to teach you the values first. That is the underlying essence. The symbolism is then for you to then constantly remind yourself. When my son looks in the mirror, he doesn't just see a young boy. He sees a young man standing up for values that he believes in. When you look in the mirror, what do you see? Ask yourself, when I look in the mirror, what is reflected back at me? Is my ego being reflected back at me, or is my master being reflected? That's a question for you. Whose reflection do you want to have? The one of your ego or the one of your master? Then you will decide for yourself what those symbols mean for you.
Why do so many people think they're not enough? How do you make that feeling go away? That's something that I see sometimes in me, or I can talk to some people that know that feel as well. So I'd love to hear your answer on this one.
So the question is, why does the feeling of being not enough?
Yeah, they're not enough. And how do you make that feeling go away?
There's a very simple answer to that question. Ask yourself, when will it be enough? When will I feel enough? That's it. And when you begin to ask that very difficult question, you will realize this big, long list that your mind has. Oh, you'll be better when you look like this. You'll be better when you lose some weight. And you'll be better when you get a better salary. And you'll be better when you're in a relationship that everyone says that you should be in. And you'll be better if you do this and do that. And maybe if you drive a better car, or you're improving your family situation. When will it be enough? Once you start to recognize this unending list, then you will begin to realize what you've done to yourself. And then you will begin to see that maybe this is not the right approach for my life. My life isn't about achieving more and more and more, because guess what? Even if you've got all of those things, you think your mind will stop? Or you think your mind will come up with new things that it hadn't thought of before. But you haven't got this. It's literally what the meaning of the phrase is, the grass is always greener on the other side. That's what it means. You're always going to be able to look somewhere else, look outside. So when will it be enough? Is a very simple question. You ask yourself the question, when will it be enough? Now, when you learn to quieten those thoughts, those intrusive thoughts that are always coming in your mind, that I need to do this and I haven't done this, then you will go into a deeper space within yourself. When you're listening to your mind, you're not actually listening to your mind. You're listening to everybody else that's been in your life. You're listening to the voice of your parents. When you were young, they were telling you, you haven't done this or you haven't done that. You're listening to the voice of your school teacher. You're listening to the voice of your managers and your previous employers. You're listening to the voice of your celebrities that you follow on social media. You're listening to all of those voices, and they're the ones that are always telling you, buy my product, do this, succeed, gain more money, wear this brand, and then you'll feel like me. That's the voices that you're listening to. But when you go quiet within yourself, there's another voice. And that voice will tell you, you are more than enough. life has given you so much more than you are appreciating. Rather than counting all of the things that you don't have, start counting all the things that you do have, and then you will be shocked how sufficient you are, how much you really have in your life.
Hi, Satpal Singh. First, my name is Iman Kaur. Maybe I'll stand up.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to say thank you, first of all. I've listened to the Japji Sahib podcast twice over, and I still need to listen to it again because there's so much wisdom. And I started the Anand Sahib podcast, so yeah, thank you. And it's also been a huge inspiration for my own podcast, which is exploring like mental health and the holistic wisdom within Buddhism and Sikhi. So I call myself a Buddhist Sikh. So I was just curious whether you've explored Buddhism and what your thoughts are on it and how it integrates with Sikhi or doesn't integrate.
So the question is around, are there any crossovers, similarities between Buddhism and Sikhi? When you begin to study these various traditions, you do find a lot of crossover. There's a lot of similar words, certainly from spiritual traditions that originate from India. The Hindu tradition, the Buddhist tradition, the Jain traditions, and Sikhi itself. So there's a lot of common language and terminology that they're using. And one of the things that I've always felt about these various traditions is they are ultimately different paths climbing to the summit of the same mountain. They will all lead you to the very top of the mountain if you go deeper into each tradition. One of the things I'm not in favor of is a mix and match approach. So I'm going to disagree with you slightly when you say that you're a Buddhist Sikh. Because Buddhism is a phenomenal tradition. I can't stress highly how amazing the wisdom is, but it is its own unique path. And the analogy that I think works well is if you want to succeed in a particular field in life, let's say you want to become an athlete, you want to reach the peak, you want to be an Olympic champion, you can't have 4 different trainers. All the trainers individually can get you to that peak, to peak performance, but they'll all have slightly different ways of achieving it. Now, none of them are wrong. But if one of your coaches is saying practice like this and the other one says, no, don't do that, practice like this, then you're going to be stuck at a very low level because you're mixing and matching. You're trying a little bit of everything. But if you take one path and take it to its final destination, you will reach the summit. So your question was around, is there any similarity between the two? In the Buddhist tradition, as I've understood it, and I don't claim to have studied it in any great detail, but certainly from what I know, the experience of stillness and silence is of profound importance. That which you may call samadhi, the state of being dissolved. There is a specific word that is generally equated to Buddhism, which is nirvana. And interestingly, the Gurus also use that terminology. The word nirvana appears in Guru Granth Sahib Ji. But you have to know what the Buddhists meant by that terminology. And that word means the experience of a candle being blown out. When the candle is blown out, it dissolves, it dissipates. So the experience of the candle being blown out is nirvana. What the Buddhists have focused on is not something different to Sikhi. It is the other side of the coin. There is one side of the coin which is about pure stillness, pure emptiness. The Zen Buddhist tradition really focuses on the absolute nothingness of it all. The other side of the coin is the fullness of spirituality, the somethingness rather than the nothingness. So in the Buddhist tradition, they will go deeper and deeper and deeper until you are nothing. The spiritual masters of the Sikh tradition said, go deeper and deeper and deeper. You are nothing, but that doesn't mean that nothing is here. Something is here. So the Sikh tradition focuses on the somethingness of life, and they give it a name. Any name that reminds you that ultimately behind everything there is a something. The Buddhists say that, but that something has no attributes, so we call it nothing. So which path are you going to go down? The path of Guru Nanak is to celebrate the somethingness of life by giving it a word. It says that I can't describe you. You have no shape. You have no form. But that doesn't mean that you're not there. You are there, and I feel your presence within me. Yeah? So which path do you want to follow? That's a question for you.
Hello. Hi everyone. Sat Shri Akal. I want to do some buttering because my question consists of 6 lines. So I've been following Nanak Naam for the last 5 years. I want to say that my perspective of looking at this verse has been completely changed. What I have a grasp from Nanak Naam that your whole motto is to look everyone as one, as divine. However, it's very difficult to see our loved ones as one. So my question is, if Sab Gobind hai, Sab Gobind hai, does this mean Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Hankar is also Gobind? If answer is yes, does this mean any species in this world have no control at all? If answer is no, how much percentage control we have on ourselves externally and internally? And who is controlling, why is controlling, and where is the controller?
That's it. That is about 6 questions, by the way. So the question is around, if everything is God, then is literally everything God, all of our negative mindset? And then how do we control it? Do we even control it? Do we have any control at all? When you read Gurbani, you're getting every perspective. And Gurbani speaks to you at every level. It speaks to every person, no matter what stage of their spiritual path they're on. Which is why when you read Gurbani, you're hearing multiple different messages, and it becomes confusing. Because on one side it says, Uddam karo, you have to make a lot of effort. Make sure you're doing this, 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 and this. Why aren't you doing it? Why are you being lazy? And on the other side it says, you have no control. So which one is it? Our analytical mind tells us that the answer must be one or the other. But the truth is that all of the things that comes out of the Guru's mouth is ultimate truth. They're all true. The question is, where are you looking? When I was a child, there was a beautiful story that I heard which has always stayed with me. And it is the story of 6 blind men walking in the jungle, and they come across an elephant. And they all reach out their hands and feel the elephant. And every person, depending on where they're standing and which part of the elephant they're holding, are describing it in different ways. So somebody's holding the trunk and say it's very long and it's flexible, and somebody else is holding the leg and saying, no, it's very wide and it doesn't move at all. And somebody's holding the tail and saying it's very thin. And somebody's holding the tusk and saying it's very strong. And it's only when a wise man walks by and realizes what's going on, he sees this picture. He says, you're all blind. You can only know that one bit that you're holding on to, that one angle that you're coming from. But none of you are wrong, because they ask the wise man, okay, he'll tell us, let's see which one of us is right. But they're all right, depending on where they're coming from. So go back to your question. Is Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Hankar, is my ego, my lust, my greed, is that also part of God? But your quote that you originally gave was Sab Gobind hai. There is God in all places and all things. So you know the answer to the question is yes. What your mind doesn't know is, well, how can these things be God? And there's a very simple way to answer that question, which is, if they're not part of God, then what are they a part of? Is there anything that is outside of God? This is where it becomes a little bit difficult because we've created God into a person. God is a guy who lives in the sky.
Upparwala, like you said.
Upparwala,
Yeah.
the one who lives up there, the one the direction that you look when you're doing your ardas. Yeah? Up there, God, Upparwala. But God is not Upparwala. God is everywhere, in all things. But because we've created this character called God and we've given God a personality, we think that it lives somewhere. It is something different to us. I know who I am, and I know the thoughts that are going on in my mind. These can't be God's thoughts, because God is all perfect. So what I encourage people to do, in order to understand God, is to stop using the word God. Now, an easier question, is the universe everywhere? You'll say, yes, the universe is everywhere. Does the universe contain all things good and all things bad? You'll say, yes, the universe contains all things good and all things bad. Is my mind part of the universe? Yes. Are my negative thoughts part of the universe? Yes. Are all the positive things that happen in the world part of the universe? Yes. So simple. Now let's take another word, life. Am I a part of life? Yes. Is life everywhere? Yes. Are my negative thoughts a part of life? Yes. So where is life? Is it somewhere else? No, it's here. Is it in me? Yes. Am I in life? Yes. Is the life that's in me the same as the life that's in you? Yes. Now where is God? You see, your understanding of God is of something else. So the question is all of this part of God? Yes. God is all things good and all things bad. When I look at Jap Sahib, one of the lines that stands out for me is Namo Kalhe Karta Namo Shant Rupe. I bow down to the creator of chaos. I bow down to the embodiment of peace. God is peace and God is chaos. God is thunder and lightning and God is sunshine. That is your starting point. This is why Guru Nanak Dev Ji begins this wisdom with there is one. Ik Onkar. First, understand that fundamental principle that there is only one. Not one guy who you're going to call God. All of this is one. All of this is oneness. The second part of your question, well then what do I control? Who am I? You control as long as you are here. Question is, are you here? You say, yes, I'm here. Is God here? That's where it becomes tricky. If I ask you, is God sitting here? You'll say, in theory, I've heard that God is sitting here. But in my experience, I don't experience God. I experience me. As long as you experience you, you're in control. Now the question is, will you control these things? Are you going to control these things so that you can know that you're not sitting here? This is where it becomes philosophical. This is where I start to lose you. And I don't want to lose you. Stay with me. I want you to understand that God is here. God is here. But there is a barrier. The barrier is, but I am here also. All of your spiritual practice, all of the restrictions that you think your religions are placing on you, is to simply get you to understand, right now you believe you're here, but that's not the truth. It's the way we explain things to children. You explain to children, yeah, you're right. Yeah, the tooth fairy is coming. Yeah? You are going to get your Christmas presents. Don't worry. Santa Claus is coming. Be a good boy. Go to sleep. This is the way the child is being spoken to. Will he get his presents? Yes, he will. Was it Santa Claus? For him it was. Was it the tooth fairy? Yes, for the child it was the tooth fairy. But as the child grows older, they let go of some of these ideas. They learn the higher truths. As you spend more time with your spiritual masters, you'll let go of your ego. You'll learn the higher truth. So while you haven't let go, you control. You need to control these things.
I want to add something, Paji, for chaos. I was listening to Sant Maskeen ji, and they were talking about how we think today is a world, we'll practice spirituality at a different date, but when today's world is very chaotic, or my life is very chaotic. But he talks about, if you look at Krishna, he was born in like a Gwala life where he was from there, and so is Buddha. Buddha was born in castles. Guru Nanak ji went to jail, like your recent one of the Instagram posts, or Guru Gobind Singh ji. All of them went through chaos, but they practiced spirituality, whereas we're going for manmat.
Yeah.
In Guru Granth Sahib ji, it says, Khasam visare te kamjat. But if a husband cheats, then the woman still has to live with her cheating husband, as I believe Guru Granth Sahib, if I do believe in Guru Granth Sahib ji. But mentally, I don't feel like being around the person who can be trusted and who can be looked up as a pillar of your life.
When you enter a spiritual path, you hear many conflating opinions, conflicting ideas, not from people who mean to pull you astray, but from people who mean well, but may be misguided. The question says, in the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, I'm told that I'm not allowed to divorce my cheating husband. I know that this person hasn't read that from Guru Granth Sahib Ji, but they've heard it from some elder or some person who must know, maybe their mother or their grandmother or someone, and they look at them and they say, well, they do part every day, surely they know the answer. If they're reading the prayers every day, they know the answer. And if they're telling me, then it must be true. There is no restriction in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, in the wisdom, in the spiritual texts, in the teachings, that tell you to spend time with those who are toxic in your life. In fact, the complete opposite is the wisdom. Stay away from those people who are toxic in your life. Try and spend your time with those who will elevate you. So the people who are telling you, oh, it's written in the religious rules that you're not allowed to do this, they know that you haven't read it and they themselves haven't understood it. They're simply passing down what they've been told and they believe. Read the wisdom yourself. Open Guru Granth Sahib Ji. It's there for you. It's available for you. You can download it on your phone. You can read it in your own language. You don't have to worry about not being able to understand the original text. It's there. It's translated for you. What you're being told is more around cultural attitudes. How will you get married again? Look at the shame that you will bring upon yourself. Look at the shame that you'll bring upon your family. That's what you're being told. Now, I want to caveat that answer with something else. There is a reason why there was a restriction that the cultures gave you. There's a reason why the culture tells you, don't get divorced. Because today, people don't want to put the same level of effort in as our ancestors did. It's far too easy today to just get up and walk away. It's much harder to stay and work on it, to work on the marriage, to work on staying together. That's hard, that's difficult. It's not an easy situation to be in, especially when you have a difficult scenario, like your partner cheating on you. Notice, I don't want to advise you one way or the other. It's your life. You're going to make that decision for yourself. I'm not telling you that it's right. I'm not telling you that it's wrong. I'm simply trying to give you a fuller picture to say, number one, there is no restriction. If you need to move away from a toxic relationship, you should, if the circumstances allow it. And again, you're going to have to assess all of these circumstances. What does it mean for where I'm going to live? What does it mean for my kids? Or if there are other dependents that are involved. If you need to move away, move away. But understand why your parents will not give you that as the first option. Because there is real value in sticking it through if you can. If you can, keep fighting to make that relationship work. And it's a two-way streak. Surely it needs both of you to work on it together. But if you can, there is a lot of value that comes in staying together, working to keep this marriage alive. For yourself, for the others. But that's not a rule. Please don't let somebody else decide. Ultimately, it has to be something that you decide. You can take the advice from other people, but ultimately you know your own scenario. You have to decide what's right for you.
Hi everyone. I'll start with Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and Namo Namo to you. I treat you as my guru from dark to light. So Namo Namo to you as I Namo Namo to my divine. My question goes in same lines with many other questions people have asked. When you see oneness in everything, when you see oneness in everything, in your five vices, in your things around you and relationships and everywhere, how does some of the lines fit in? From Gurbani, I'm going to read one verse so I don't say wrong. I'm going to read it. It's Kabir Ji de Panchpade Nove. Pati tore malani pati pati jio. Jis pahan ko pati tore so pahan nirjio. The reason I'm asking this is, again, goes back to oneness concept. But as I'm working in my backyard, as I'm going through all this weed killing process, I'm going through all this. I'm like, look, everywhere there's, if you are seeing everything, this is kind of like you're killing your five vices, but you're also seeing other, there's life in those. My wife's sitting right here. She's got a bug phobia. She's like, wherever she sees something, oh, dekho machhar aa gaya. I'm sorry. But I mean...
You're going to have a difficult ride home.
The amount of spiders I've killed from my wife, I'm for sure going to hell.
So the question is, if God is everywhere, then why should we even hurt a single fly or pluck a single plant? Thank you for that question. It's a beautiful verse. Pati tore malani, pati pati jio. Jis pahan ko pati tore, so pahan nirjio. When we look at Gurbani, it's very important to try to understand who was the message being said to at that time. In that particular verse, it refers to a metaphorical gardener. And it says, "O gardener, why are you plucking the plants and tearing the flowers and the leaves? Within each and every leaf, there is the divine." But the context is around those people who would take flowers from a garden, string them together and put them together in a nice bouquet and present them to an idol, to a god, to a stone that is carved in the shape of a deity. Look, this is my offering to you. Bhagat Kabir Ji is saying, "O gardener, O foolish gardener, you are breaking something that is alive and presenting it to something that is dead." It says, "So pati nirjiyo," that stone god that you think is a god is a lifeless stone that's just been carved into the shape of a deity. Don't you know that God is alive all around you? So that is the message there. That you don't need to pluck a flower and present it. You simply need to be able to see the God that is all around you. But you can take that to the next level. Well, if God is everywhere, should I not even eat a plant or a vegetable because I'm killing God? And that's where you have to take a little step back and you have to think about it. The divine is everything. Divine is not just all the good things. The divine is all creation and all destruction. The reason you're alive today is you've had to kill many things in order to sit here, in order to just feed yourself. There is a beautiful teaching in the wisdom that says, Jiya ka ahar ji. Life feeds on life. That is God's system. That is the system of life. Whether you eat a plant or an animal is immaterial. You are not here without consuming life, without killing other plants and other animals. That is how it works. If you need to prune your garden, prune your garden. It's okay. Recognize that that is the play of God. What you haven't done in your search for God and seeing that God is everywhere, you've forgotten one step. God is here also. You are not killing God. God is killing God. Once you're okay with that, then it becomes a lot easier to understand how to navigate this. Because you're saying, should I kill God? And you've broken Guru Nanak's mathematical formula. Guru Nanak's wisdom is there is only one. There is only one. Everything is one. That's his mathematical formula, 1 equals 1. But you've introduced yourself in there. Am I killing God? If there is a me and there is a God, then you will not know what God is. One of my most favorite learnings from this wisdom is Jab hum hote, tab tu nahi, ab tu hi main nahi. As long as I was there, I did not know what God was. Now that I know what God is, I know that I'm not there. So it's okay. Let God prune the trees.
Meanwhile, we take the next question from this side. Just want to add to that, buddy, is just a lot of subject to interpretation comes in as well. And I think maybe in beginning of your search on this path, you might be reading one Shabad, then you go back to other Shabad, like, oh, this Shabad is conflicting this Shabad, or this wisdom is conflicting this wisdom. So it is a balance and probably a self-discovery journey where you'll read one Shabad and you'll be like, okay, this is, whatever I've heard or whatever I've read before is totally, I need to go back, circle down again. So that's just part of, I think, the journey itself.
And it's the part of learning, because we don't actually do that. Most people don't even do that, spend time understanding the wisdom. How else are you going to learn it without actually giving yourself the opportunity to learn it, to see the apparent contradictions, to then go away and spend the time thinking about it? Well, maybe it's not contradicting. You're going to have to, this is a process of learning. You yourself have to come up with the solutions. Then you go and ask a couple of people, hey, what do you think? How do you interpret? How do you interpret it? And don't be afraid to realize that after time, your own understandings will change. So you might say, I used to think like this, but then after a while, I now understand it like this. Tomorrow, a new understanding might come. That's all part of the learning journey.
Okay. Hello, hi. My name's Kulvinder, and I guess I wanted to thank you and echo some of the comments that came from this side of the room. I'll jump to my question. If oneness is everywhere, and you raised a point about once you stop being in control, then things change or they're not in your control anymore. I guess my question is around that very popular question about why bad things happen to good people. I've listened to your podcast and you've enlightened me so much, but I guess my question is, I sort of understand that part, but where does suffering come in? So lots of suffering happened with COVID, after COVID, because of COVID, and many other health reasons. But why does, even if you look at an incapacitated person, when that one is no longer in control, why does Waheguru let them suffer?
That's a very important question. Thank you for that. So the question is around, why is there suffering in the world? And it's a greater question than why do bad things happen to good people? It's a more significant question. Why do bad things happen at all? Why, if God is everywhere, why does he allow suffering? What you call suffering may not be suffering. we have created a very unrealistic way of looking at life. Our way of looking at life is that everyone should be happy and well and prosperous all the time. Yet when we look at the world, we see that that's not the way of the world. Life isn't like that. Suffering is merely down to one thing: your inability to accept life as it is. What you see as suffering, when you see the world, when you see people going through difficult scenarios, what you're really saying is, if that was happening to me, I would not like it. I would be struggling if that was happening to me. You then project that idea of struggling onto other people. And it could be true that the other people that you're looking at are also suffering. But the fundamental truth is always the same. Suffering is simply an inability to accept life for what life is doing right now. And in order to teach this lesson, the masters had to do something very drastic. The masters had to show you that what you call suffering, they can tolerate. Within the Sikh tradition, this was demonstrated by the fifth Guru, Guru Arjan Dev Ji. I've asked myself this question: why did a Guru have to go through torture? So for those of you who don't know, the fifth Guru within the Sikh tradition was captured by the governing forces at the time. Charges were laid against him. They found him guilty. And they didn't just sentence him to death, they sentenced him to torture and death. And the most excruciating torture, he was made to sit on a hot iron plate that was burning with fire underneath, and he was made to sit on there. He was made to endure what we would call real suffering. Even at the time, some of his saints would visit him during his torture, and they said, "Guru, please tell us what we can do. Tell us, should we fight this? We can get you out of here. We can do things to try and get you out of this suffering." And his teaching was, "I'm not suffering." He said, "I'm in bliss." Even while he was being tortured. And the reason he had to go through that was to show you whatever you're going through in life is nothing compared to what your human potential is. The human potential, the highest form of a human being, is one that can tolerate and enjoy life no matter what life throws at it. That is what is the reality of your potential being. But because you don't know that within yourself, you only know comfort. You know that you enjoy comfort and you can't tolerate pain. So you project that onto others. God is not some guy sitting in the sky deciding who should get the good things in life and who should get the bad things. I worry that we've made God into Santa Claus.
Sky Daddy, you say?
Yeah.
Sky Daddy.
Well, what do we teach about Santa Claus? You better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. I'm telling you why. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good. So be good for goodness sake. That's what we say about Santa Claus. And the reality is that's what you've done to God. You've made God into some person in the sky who sees you when you're sleeping and knows when you're awake and knows if you've been bad or good. So if you do the good things, God will give you good things. If you do bad things, God will give you bad things. But that's just simply not reality. Our biggest confusion has come is because we cannot let go of the idea that God is some person sitting in the clouds. Please let go of that idea. Get rid of that God. That is not God. God is Ik Onkar, one infinite life force permeating throughout all things. And that life force is a spectrum. If you want a life without suffering, it's simply as unrealistic as somebody who wants a sunrise but doesn't want the sunset. The very reason sunrise happens is because the sun had to set before that. Good and bad are yin and yang. They're happening all the time. They're simply your labels. There is really no such thing as good and bad. And this is a very difficult lesson that the masters teach us. There is no good and there is no bad. There is only things that your ego can take and your ego doesn't want to take. But the masters are able to see it for what life really is. Everything is simply happening. Now, does that mean that if you see someone struggling that you don't help them, you just say, hey, it's all God. I don't have to do anything about it. No. If you see someone suffering, if your heart calls out to help them, help them. But don't judge God for what He's doing that you can't understand.
Does that tie to Bhaji, when we say in Japji Sahib or read in Japji Sahib, Ketyan duk phuk sab mar, e pai daat teri daatar. So do we see it as that suffering is helping us evolve or connect back to the foundation oneness?
There's a beautiful teaching in the wisdom that says, Dukh daru, sukh rog paya. Pain is a medicine, and pleasure is a disease. And what you've just beautifully articulated, pain is a reason for us to snap out of our ego. It's when you ask questions like this, why is this happening? What is going on? It's you questioning the matrix of life. What's going on? Life is not working the way I thought it should be working. Unfortunately, what we do with that is we then say, is life doing something wrong? What you should be doing is, have I understood life wrong? The masters are telling you, you're not going to be able to fix the world. There is never going to be a time when there is not pain and suffering in the world. And there has never been a time when there is not pain and suffering in the world. As long as there is life, as long as the system exists the way it does, there is going to be the ups and downs of life. The question is, as life goes up and as life goes down, do you go up and down with it? Or are you able to rise above and just float and observe life and accept life for what it is? And at some moments you may have to go in, step in and help, and at some moments you can step back and do nothing. But at no point should you judge God based on your understanding of God. You don't ask God to change, you ask your own mind to change.
Hello. Okay, Sat Sri Akal, Uncle G, if I can call you Uncle G. Want me to stand up? Oh, okay. Like I said, I have a question for you. So your teaching of Hukam has really, really helped me when you talk about it being reality. My question for you, though, is if I am on this spiritual journey and I am, I feel like my heart and soul are connected with what we call God, but my mind doesn't feel at ease with that, or vice versa, what do we do in that sense? Do we continue to do prayer? Like I'm just kind of looking for some wisdom in that.
So just clarify that for me again.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like when I'm trying to accept something for reality, right, or I feel like things are aligned, like I feel like I understand the teachings, right, of Bani or of God, of whatever we're learning. I feel like my heart and my soul feel connected to it, but my mind doesn't always comprehend it, or vice versa. I feel like my mind comprehends it, but it's not aligned with like my body and soul. So my question for you is the answers for that to continue to do prayer? Like what do we do when we don't feel everything is aligned?
The nature of the mind is to always question things. The nature of the mind is to always analyze life based on what will be beneficial to the mind. That's what the ego is doing all the time. So there are times when you feel, I can accept it, I understand it, there's a higher purpose to this. And then your mind has this little noise that says, no, it's not. What about me? What about this? What about that?
The monkey mind, is that what we don't label it as?
Yeah. When that's happening again and again, Your mind is simply showing you where it is at in life. And this is where we need to learn. Sometimes the mind will just carry on making noise, but we know that we don't need to give our attention to that mind. You don't have to get to a point where your mind is happy all the time. The purpose of your mind is to look after you. The mind is always trying to say, do I like this person? Do I not? Is that safe? Is that not? Should I eat this? Should I not eat this? Yeah, is this going to be good for me or not? In fact, it's a beautiful tool in that way. It's been created to always look out for you and always look out for itself. And in doing that, it's going to question everything. Question life. Is that good? Yeah, I know the wisdom tells you, but shall we double check it ourselves? Yeah? So you're not always going to be able to get your mind to agree with something that you know in your heart. And that's when you can sometimes just be okay with the fact that the mind is constantly going to question. That's its role. I like to think that expecting your mind to be silent is like expecting your heart to stop beating. You wouldn't want your heart to stop beating. In the same way, we don't want our mind to be silent all the time. We don't need an empty mind. So you appreciate the mind for what it does, but sometimes you need to just say, okay, I know I've heard your opinion, thank you. But I'm not going to listen to you in this moment, I'm going to listen to my heart. That's when you begin spirituality, when you're able to create a little bit of distance between you and the thoughts. Otherwise, what ends up happening is you are constantly believing the mind. Everything that the mind says you believe should be true. When you start to create a little bit of distance, you say, there's my mind talking again. It's useful, nine times out of 10, it's useful. This time, I'm not going to listen to it. So you create that little bit of gap, that space between you and the mind, because ultimately, this is a path of rising above the mind. Not silencing the mind, rising above it, despite the fact that the mind is going to carry on doing what it's doing.
Just wanted to add to that, Paji. Maybe you can just reflect on it a little bit. I was listening, or someone, Joe Dispenza. He's a neuro scientist. He connects meditation and whatnot. So he was talking about, let's say if we are able to control our mind once, okay, mind, keep quiet, you're not right. Our neurons that are able to control that are now firing together. So next time you will be better prepared to close that thought before a thought takes you somewhere else. And neurologically, we are training our mind to fire the positive neurons or the negative neurons. So I think just training our mind is coming back to, now science is recognizing that training the mind comes back to bringing us more peace.
Yeah, and sometimes that's a very good answer, which is, it's around this concept of neurons that fire together, neurons that wire together, fire together. And so what that simply means is that every time you look at the same thing and you have the same thought, eventually the object and the thought become wired together. That's why whenever, the same person walks into the room, even 5, 10, 15 years later, you haven't seen them, the same old thoughts come back up again. Because that person or that object and that thought were wired together. And so what this wisdom is teaching you is that then you actively overwrite that thought. You actively create something new, which is really what mantra jap is all about, which is reciting a mantra, which is now relabeling the same old labels that you used to give. You're now giving that a new label. So you're breaking the connection between the object and the thought that automatically comes when you see that object.
What does Gurbani mean in terms like Rahim, Daya, Kirpa? Example, tum daya karo mere saईं, ऐसी मत दीजिए मेरे ठाकुर सदा सदा तो त्याई, और रहम तेरी सुख पाया सदा नानक की अरदास. This sounds like there is someone external to us, like Sky Daddy. I need his grace, mercy, kindness in order to be enlightened. Gurbani is clear that Sky Daddy does not exist. So who is giving this grace, what it is, and how does that work? And Paji, I know you did a video on a similar Shabad, like Madho from Anantveer got, Pai Anantveer has a very famous Shabad Madho, and a similar kind of concept of someone outside, not inside. So that's the question.
So this is an interesting question, which is around certain verses within the tradition are calling out to God and saying, please give me your kindness, please be kind to me, please grace me, please bless me. And the wisdom also talks that there is no one up in the clouds. God is not far away. God is near to you. In fact, it is everywhere. It is the essence of everything. So who are we calling out to? How does this system work where God gives you grace when there isn't some other God somewhere else? This is really where the Guru's teachings are so superior that we're not able to even understand what the Guru is doing. At times, the Guru's wisdom talk to us like a master talking to a student. At other times, the Guru's teachings are put in the language of the student. So the Guru speaks for us and says, this is how you think. This is you asking, oh God, please bless me. So the Guru's wisdom speaks in many different personalities because in the hope that one of them will stick with you. One of them will speak to you and say, oh, that's me. That sounds like me. That sounds like the question I have. So there are many different voices that are used, tones of voices, and different terminologies that are used. So in this particular question, it's asking, how can there be a prayer that goes out to God when in other lessons it says that God is not far from us, it's everywhere? As long as you have no idea what God is, as long as you do not experience God, you will always think of God as far away. Now, the Guru can't just constantly give you the same lesson every time and say, no, God is not far away. Because sometimes when the teacher gives the same lesson to the student and the student doesn't understand, the teacher thinks, maybe I should try a different lesson, a different way to explain. So it says, go and ask God for help. Try that lesson. Because the first lesson, that there is no God that's separate from you, doesn't seem to be working for you. Try this lesson. Every day ask God so that for the grace that I can see you. Tum karo daya mere sai. Oh God, please bless me. Aisi mat dijiye mere Thakur, sada sada tud tyai. Give me this wisdom that I can always meditate on you. So the teacher is now telling the student, try this lesson of just asking God every day for help. See how that changes your life. What are you asking for? That's the key thing. In this prayer, you're not asking, oh God, please give me a new Mercedes. That's not what you're asking for. The prayer is, oh God, I can't see you. Please bless me that I may remember you and see you all the time. What do you think is going to happen to your life if that became your prayer every morning and every evening?
It's like bin tod jo mangana so dukhan de dukh. So we are basically always asking for the divine connection and nothing else.
Don't ask.
And as soon as we're like, hi, I want this new garment, and it doesn't work out, I'm like, I don't like the God anymore.
That's it. What is going to happen to you when you begin to ask this and that becomes your heartfelt prayer every day? You're eventually going to start feeling it. You're going to start seeing it. And eventually you're going to get to the point where you say, I can see God. I can see God everywhere. I can see God in me. I can see God in you. Because I made that my prayer. I made that the manifestation. I made that the central priority of my life. And ultimately you will come to the same position. God is everywhere. So this question around how can God give you grace is assuming that God is not giving you grace, and sometimes if you ask nicely, then you'll give it. But if you continue on this journey of trying to experience God at all times and in all moments, in all places, you will realize God's grace is happening all the time. It was your ego that was blocking the way. It was your idea that I exist that was blocking your connection to seeing God's grace. God's grace isn't something that is switched on and switched off. The very fact that you're breathing is God's grace.
Have you found that spiritual teachings are great to learn, but not always easy to apply to your own life? Sometimes we all need a bit of support and guidance from people who know what we're going through and can help us find some answers. The Nanak Naam Facebook group helps you do just that. It's an online community where you can ask any questions about life and get answers from other members of the group. Search for Nanak Naam Community Support and join our free Facebook group today.
My name is Preet, and I do have a couple of questions that might be rookie questions because I just started my spiritual journey by understanding the meaning of Japji Sahib, and I'm very. I consider myself to be very fortunate to be able to ask you this question face to face. So my first question is, so right now I'm at Suniye Paudi, Suniye Sid Pir Surnath, and the words that kind of stuck with me was Amrit Vela Sachna Vadiyai Vichar. So my first question is, how important is it for somebody to get up at 5 in the morning, who's just starting their spiritual journey? So what's the significance of Amrit Vela there? Can somebody not just quickly pray for like 5 minutes at 7 versus 4 in the morning? Like, what difference would that make? And it is a genuine question. And the second question was, somewhere in the explanation you suggested that look into the mirror and say, this might be the day that I could die today. So I did that to myself I could only do it for 2 days versus a week, because isn't that you manifesting your own death? So it's just a genuine question into, are we manifesting or surrendering ourselves? So, but I would like to know more about the Amrit Vela,
Thank you.
Before you answer, I have same question from the audience as well. So a lot of people now want to get up at 2:30 for sure. So yeah, just everyone says Amrit Vela is the best time to do Naam Japna, and I am not clear what time is Amrit Vela starts, as sometimes I get up at 1:30, 2 o'clock, or what's the right time to do morning Nitnem.
So the question around what is the value of waking up early, what is the right time, I'm going to give you an answer that is not going to be the standard answer that you get. I'm just giving you that as a disclaimer. And my answer is this, and this is my understanding, having looked at it and tried to interpret it in my own way. There is no magic hour. There is no time where the energy is higher. There is no time where your prayers somehow magically get more bonus points. Now, what does that mean for Amrit Vela? Amrit Vela means that there is a time where your experience of life is like drinking the nectar of life. Amrit Vela. You're drinking the ultimate juice of life. And the wisdom has recommended that wake up early in the morning in order to experience this Amrit Vela. Most people who look at this wisdom see it as an impractical suggestion. But allow me to present why it is the most practical thing. You only have to just notice for a couple of days, stop waking up at Amrit Vela, wake up at the normal time that you think is what ordinary, everyday people need to wake up. Whatever that time is for you. Let's call it 6 o'clock. Wake up at 6 o'clock, notice what your mind does. When you wake up, when life needs to start, notice what your mind does. As a parent, my mind immediately goes, did the kids wake up? Are they going to get ready for school? Or are the kids late? Do I have to jump out of bed and wake them up? Have we got everything in the fridge, or do I need to go to the grocery store? Do I have any meetings today? Let me check my emails. That's what your mind will do. Be honest with yourself. Try it out. Just try waking up at whatever time you think life needs to start. Now, at that time, try and meditate for 5 minutes. See how effective it is. Have you ever tried it? Where you have a list of priorities of all the things that you need to do, but you say, oh, I can squeeze in a 3-minute meditation. And you try and sit down for meditation, you can't even do it for 1 minute. Because your mind has already kicked in. It's already there to remind you of all the things that you haven't done. This is why this wisdom is so practical. It says before your day is meant to start, wake up slightly earlier than that. Now, for some people, they mention 1 o'clock or 2:30. Again, they're being very prescriptive. Oh, what's the magic time? Is it 1 to 3 or is it 2 to 5? What's the magic time? There's no magic time. If you work a night shift, what's your Amrit Vela? If your work starts at 11 p.m. and you don't get off to work till 8 a.m., what's your Amrit Vela? You have to decide. What time does your life start? What time does the mind kick in? What time are all the noises of the mind going to kick in? That's natural. You want to try and meditate at that time? It's like trying to get a seat on a train at the busiest rush hour. You can't. So you have a choice. Are you going to try and get a seat and complain, why is the train so busy? Or wake up earlier and catch an earlier train. You'll get a seat. Wake up earlier and see when your mind is not so busy. And you know this. If you ever wake up in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to even get out of bed because you're like, what am I going to do with my day? I've got nothing to do right now. So you stay in bed and you just lie there and you look at the ceiling and then your mind goes in all the different things, not because it's busy, because it's free. Or you pick up your phone and you start looking at Instagram or whatever it is. But there is real value in waking up before life starts. Now, if you're finding that difficult, so I don't have 2 hours to wake up in the morning, try 5 minutes earlier. If you set your alarm at 6 o'clock, try setting your alarm 5 minutes earlier and dedicate those 5 minutes knowing my life doesn't start till 6 a.m. I don't need to get out of bed. I don't have to wake up the kids. I don't have to go make their lunch boxes. I don't have to look at my emails. Notice the quality of your meditation a few minutes earlier, and if it works, add a bit more time. Add a bit more time to that. But don't assume that there's some sort of magic time. Because if we do that, then we start bringing guilt in our life. Oh, I didn't wake up at this time. Well, I'm just not going to do any meditation. I'll start again tomorrow. It's a bit like me and my diet.
I connect with this way, but maybe like, again, if you want to start a beginner's guide, is like you say, okay, I'm in a company, I'm clocking in, my mind is clocking at 6 a.m. Let's get 5:45. That's our time. Mind, you stay, just chill on the side. You're going to be busy all day. Just 6 o'clock is when you start.
Hi, Satpal Ji. I have 2 questions. It'll be very quick. How do you maintain a divine state of mind when people around you or associate with are in a lower state of mind constantly? That's the first question. Second one is expectations of spouse and family. Having expectations is part of your ego, but being married or having a family, I think everyone should have some sort of expectation of that significant other. How do you deal with that, and how do you possibly detach from that, or what are your guidance on that?
So the first question was around?
The divine state of mind. How do you deal with people who are around you that are in a lower state of mind constantly? So they might be spewing negativity towards you or hearing negativity. How do you stay in that elevated state of mind for yourself?
The question around how do you stay in an elevated state of mind when all the people around you are in their lower mind, in negativity, in gossip, in all those sorts of things. The wisdom is very clear. Do not spend time with those people who drag you down. It's very harsh in some of the wording that it uses. It categorically calls them animals. People behave like animals, like beasts, like demons, it even calls them. Now, that's not for you to call those people that. That's your guru telling you this is the impact that they're having on your life. Otherwise, you create a spiritual ego. I'm not like that. Look at you people. You are of a lower mind. I'm of a higher mind. That's your ego. But the wisdom is very clear. You need to be able to make some difficult choices in life that says, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. Now, let me give you some comfort. You've already known how to do this. When you were in your teenage years, in your late teens, in your early 20s, we had lots of friends, people that we wanted to hang around with. Even the ones that were annoying, it felt good to be in part of a big group. It felt good to be part of a community of some sort. But as you grew older and you spent more time with them, you began to slowly break away from some people and say, you know what, these people, I don't actually gel with them. I don't know why I hang around with them anymore. You've already known how to walk away from some of these things. Now, the difficulty comes where you can't walk away from some people because they're in your life, they're in your homes, they're in your offices. That's where the wisdom actually has to really kick into hyperdrive. That's where you have to now realize, okay, I can't change this scenario, because the simple answer is just try and spend time with the right people. But in certain scenarios, you can't do that. There is a beautiful teaching that says, "Je ko nind kare har jan ki, apna gun na gawave." When you see negative people around you, they should not create negativity within you. If one is creating havoc, chaos, a toxic environment, you yourself maintain your higher level. That's where it's going into the idea of battling your own mind. Because you know how it is when your manager walks in and just is very rude to you, or a colleague or someone. There are people in your life where you just wish they weren't there, but they're there. Your lower mind usually kicks in. How dare they say that? I'll show him. Who does he think he is? Right? That's what your lower mind does. And then your lower mind goes home and it has a gossip and says, you can't believe what Brian said to me today. Right? Or you're saying that to your colleagues at work. You try and actually build little sort of alliances with other people. Say, oh, you don't like Brian either? I don't like Brian. Right? And you start creating
this,
these.
Instagram quote, Paji, say, when I'm good, I'm good. When I'm bad, I'm worse. And people, like, there's millions of likes on it because you connect as your mind. It's like, yeah, that resonates with me. I could be bad.
Yeah.
Like, if you, but where spiritual Gurmat is saying that when someone is bad, you be on the higher side.
That's it. So you have to then avoid your lower mind's reactions, your immediate responses. Try and live in that higher mind. So for me, that's a particular quote that really speaks to me. I wouldn't say that you're being a pushover. I would say that you're being deeply tolerant. So much so that ultimately, when you realize that you can't change the other person, the only change is within yourself. Can you be a beacon of light for someone else? One of the hardest things is actually to see someone who is in negativity and actually feel sympathy for them. And actually say, what is it that's going on in your life that makes you like this? No, pray for them. Pray for their well-being. Knowing that, I know I would never act that way. What must have gone on in this person's life that they act in this particular way? So I don't think that's a pushover at all.
There's a similar question from the audience, so I'll just read it so that it saves time. How to come in terms with grief when a long-term partner of 25 years has not been able to spiritually grow amongst other things alongside me? I've grown closer to Waheguru, and then they have always resisted, but have been growing away from me too. It's the end of our relationship now, and I feel grief, but also a sense of peace of what happened. It's very hard sometimes to deal with the guilt and shame over this breakdown. So I think we did talk about a little bit about divorce. I think your question comes closer if you have spouse or someone that, like, let's say in terms of that. So I'm just trying to pull these questions together. If they are not pulled, then you can definitely.
Yeah. So the question's coming from some of the interpretations that I've given, which is about not having expectations of life. Rise above that so that as life happens, you're okay with it no matter what it does. And you rightly asked the question, but surely within a relationship, we need to have expectations of each other. Just a simple scenario, in order for a family to get together, everyone has to pull their weight. In order for two parents to raise children successfully, you both have to be in alignment. So when I say don't have expectations, I don't mean that you don't create a partnership with other people in order to get a job done. You absolutely need to do that. And, the best example is actually working with someone and trying to run a business together. If the two of you are equal partners and one person's not pulling their weight, you can't step back and say, well, I have no expectations of you, you just do whatever you want. Because the project demands that both of us actually pull our weight, and both of us actually do what's needed to. So when I say don't have expectations, it's not about not even creating a sense of working togetherness. When I say don't place expectations on others, It's don't place your happiness on that other person succeeding. And that's what I mean by that. Don't create your happiness as a dependency. You can create an expectation, even to run an event like this today. My expectation was that the colleagues that we're all
Really high.
well, the colleagues that we're working with, that everyone has to kind of do their jobs. But the higher wisdom is around, will I be disappointed if they don't do their jobs? That's about you. That's not actually about the other person. You should place expectations on everyone else to work together. But do you place that happiness on them? Or do you control your happiness? Do you place your happiness within your tight grasp? And that's something where you realize, actually, it's nothing to do with them. It's more to do with me.
Is this similar? Like someone says that your TV remote, which is your mind, should be in your hands. Don't give anyone else the remote of your TV that this person gets me mad, or this person is like, I can't even see his face.
Yeah.
Is that giving your remote to someone else?
Yeah, that's giving your emotions away to someone else. Why would you let somebody else decide your emotions? Nobody actually decides your emotions. You decide all of your own emotions. And that's one of the hardest lessons, is that we think, I'm upset because of this person. It's because of what they did. No, this person did something. You chose sadness as your response. You chose frustration as your response. They cannot give you frustration. They can do something. Frustration comes out of you. You see the difference between what somebody does and how you respond? There's a gap. There's a difference between that. The phrase that I love and that's resonated with me is, my response is my responsibility.
Sat Shri Akal, Paji. Sat Shri Akal, everyone. It's a blessing to have you here, and I must say that your videos are also a blessing. I'm battling with cancer these days, and your videos have been like more than a blessing. I have found many answers on those videos. But now my question is, what will be your words of wisdom to give strength to a person like me whose clock is ticking? Of course, the clock is ticking for everyone, but I hope you understand the perspective of life totally changes, right? So what would be something that gives me strength for the rest of my life?
You used a very interesting phrase. What would you say to me knowing that my clock is ticking? Let me give you some words of comfort. All our clocks are ticking. And my clock could stop ticking well before yours. The Guru's wisdom around death is one of the most profound that I've seen amongst various spiritual traditions. The amount of focus that the Guru gives on death is greater than many other spiritual traditions. It is almost as though the Guru is saying, for you to know God, first know death. The Guru has very clearly said, Pehla maran kabul, Jeevan ki chhad aas, ho sabna ki ren ka, to aao hamare paas. First, your first lesson is know that you're going to die. And I'm no longer just speaking to you, I'm speaking to everyone. Your first spiritual lesson is know that you are going to die. Then you're ready to step into this school of wisdom. Because this is a wisdom of being willing to die. This is a wisdom of being willing to die. Notice that within yourself, within all of us, is a very strong resistance to dying. The Guru is saying your first lesson is know that you are going to die. The second lesson is that the reason you must know you're going to die is because you can know that you are not this body. You were alive long before this body came, and long after this body goes, you will still be alive. Because you are not bound by this body. You are not this body. Just like when you're driving a car and somebody hits into the side of your car, you don't say, I am hurt. Because you know, I am not this car. If the car is damaged too much, I'll get rid of this car and I'll buy a new car. Death is simply you shedding this body and moving to another state. Recognize that you are the infinite, undying God. Now, I don't want that to be flowery words for you, and I don't want that to be flowery words for anyone else. Because for those of us who are not facing immediate death, we can use words like that. Oh, I'm the undying spirit of the universe. But for someone facing death, they say, I don't know that as my experience. That is not my experience right now, and maybe I'm running out of time. This takes no amount of time. It is just a reality that is true right now deep within you. You are not dying, because this body is the only thing that can die. You cannot die. And that is the most important lesson. But what will die? For all of us, this body will die. This name will die, the name that society has given us. These memories will die. When you can begin to realize that even if you didn't have cancer, the Guru would still expect you to kill all these things. Kill your own name. Kill your own identity. Let go of your addiction to your body, because that's all it is. We all have an addiction to our body. We all want it to stay the same. We all want it to stay healthy. The Guru is saying, you cannot. This body is definitely dying. The truth of the matter is, all of those around you may die before you. You don't know when you're going to die. You don't.
But is this a sense of I that's dying then? Or like my inner like ego or my, all those things are dying? Is that what you see from spiritual perspective death is?
That is what death is. It is all the things that were always going to die are actually now starting to happen. So the Guru has fast-tracked your enlightenment. For everyone else, they have to wait until death comes. The Guru is saying, here's a lesson for you. These things that were never yours, they were borrowed, are now going to be given back. And let me remind you, you know how to do this. When you go on holiday and you rent a car, you enjoy the car. But at the back of your mind, you always know at the end of this week, I have to give it back. When you book a hotel room, you enjoy the hotel room. You enjoy the catering. You enjoy the swimming pool. You enjoy the great view. But you know at the back of your mind, this is temporary. The fools have forgotten that all of this is on rent. The spiritual masters have reminded us that this is on rent. You are going to give this back. And you don't know when you're going to give it back. But you're definitely going to give it back. So this is a beautiful teaching from the Guru. Thank you that you are reminding me that all of these things are going to be given back. And when all of these things are given back, can I stay with you? Don't let me float somewhere else away from you. My only desire is that I remain with you, but not after I die. Now, put all of your focus not on what is going to happen and what's going to happen to my children and what about my spouse and what about this and what about that. Because that's what everybody else does. Place your focus on deep gratitude. Thank you for allowing me to have a spouse. Thank you for allowing me to enjoy this holiday. Thank you for allowing me to enjoy the view. Thank you for allowing me to enjoy the rental car. But once I give it back, I know that there's something greater. There's something higher. Place all of your attention on that. Gratitude is going to save every single one of you. Deep gratitude for life and deep gratitude for the ultimate lesson that life must be returned.
It's they say when a child is born, what's the most like confident thing I can say that this child's going to die? That's the only truth that I can say. I can't say this child will be a doctor, engineer, or a photographer, or a spiritual teacher doing YouTube work. It's just that this child or this life is going to go at one day. Do we have guardian angels or spirit guides guiding us and protecting us, as mentioned in a lot of spiritual books? Does Guru Granth Sahib have any mention of these concepts?
So the question is, do we have guardian angels guiding us?
Yeah.
The wisdom of Guru Nanak is only about one thing, and that is the ultimate truth. There may be guardian angels, there may be spirit guides, there may be angels that look after you, but that is not your focus. This is the path of letting go of all things that are temporary and focusing your attention on the ultimate truth. The wisdom says, even if there are angels, even they desire to connect to God. Even they are not at the pinnacle. Surnar Munjan Amrit Khojde. Even they are hoping for that connection, that nectar. So Amrit Gurte Paya. And the Guru is giving you that ultimate connection. So if you have guardian angels, what are you going to do with them? Tell them to sit next to you, meditate. You need to meditate just as much as I do.
Sat Shri Akal Paji, my name is Tanveer. First off, thank you so much for today's session and all the online content. It has really transformed my life. And coming to my question, it's around self-respect versus ego, or self-love versus ego. Gurbani has many verses or many shabd on home or ego. But my question is, what does Gurbani say about self-love or self-respect? And second question following that is, when do you know that self-love or self-respect has turned in the form of an ego now? Thank you.
That's a wonderful question.
Such a good question.
Thank you.
I have a similar question around
Sure.
that. Do you want
Okay.
me to read that now? Or?
Yeah, if it's related, yeah.
In one of your videos, you mentioned the pain comes from not accepting hukum. And as humans, we experience wider of emotions like sadness, disappointment, especially when things do not go as expected, such as not getting a job I hoped for. How do I reconcile this concept of hukum and apply in life? So,
the question around what does the Guru teach about self-love versus destroying your ego, and how do you know when self-love has turned into ego? Self-love is always your ego. Because what is your definition of yourself? Which self are you going to love? Are you going to love your ego self? When we use these words, it's very important that we get time to understand what do we mean by these things. Your question is, how do I know when self-love turns to ego? Means that you have defined yourself as different from your ego. It means that I have a self, and then I have an ego. Ego is the bad part of me. It's the negative, selfish part of me. That's your definition of self and ego. That's not the Guru's definition of self and ego. The Guru uses the word which you mentioned, home. What is the translation of home? It's not ego. The word home means me. Home. The closest word in English that I've been able to translate to home is myself. Me, myself. It doesn't say your ego is the problem. It doesn't say your selfishness is the problem. It says your myself is the problem. Now, which one are you going to give self-love to? There is no such thing as ego love. You can't love your ego. Well, you can. But it's not a good thing. Society has just given you a confusing term called self-love. The Guru says, no, there's no such thing. It's called ego love. Ego doesn't mean my bad self. Ego means I believe I am driving. I believe I am here. That is the problem. It's a very, very important definition that you must understand. You believe you are here. Whether you're a good person or a bad person is immaterial. Do you believe you are here? You say, yes, I believe I'm here. That's the problem. The Guru's teaching, you are not there. God is there. And as soon as we say that, your mind kicks in. And you're able to hear your mind and say, no, it's not. God's not here, I'm here. Your mind doesn't want to get up and leave. I think about it like two people can't drive the same car at the same time. Either you're driving or you get up and let someone else drive. Either you drive or God drives. That is not what most people want from their life. Most people want to drive and they want God to sit in the passenger seat. They want to have their own life and a little bit of God on the side.
Skip all the red lights for God's job and you drive. And
you don't want God to drive your life. You want to drive. And God is not there to be a passenger in your life. Either you drive or God drives. So there is no such thing as ego versus the self. Understand the myself that I think is a good person, I think I'm kind, I think I'm generous, I think I'm pretty loving, but every now and then I have a little bit of ego. I must deal with my ego. No. Real self-love is when you get rid of the ego self and you begin to recognize this is the divine self. The amount of love that comes from that this is the divine, that is real self-love. Because then you're not just loving this small, limited version of yourself. You are part of the infinite. The question is, are you willing to get up and let God drive? If you are, the amount of self-love that you will experience will be overwhelming.
I think, Baji, this is so opposite of like what marketing teams or these advertisements or Instagram handles or Zen way of like the new, I would say, wellness is like, oh, like give some self-love, come every Sunday and this power. And that's great to spend time in whatever you want to do. But I think there's very little talk about diminishing your ego and connecting. Like just self-love is only seen in a way of like, okay, you just pamper yourself in external ways, not internal ways to that much.
Yeah, it's the hijacking of spiritual language for marketing purposes.
It works really well, though.
Yeah, hi. Satpal, my name's Tajinder, and Nanak Naam's doing a tremendous job, and may it take good globally as you're doing so fantastic job. My question's on control, particularly around preordained destiny. I have read it in the Guru Granth Sahib. I read a lot on the Guru when he states a preordained destiny. I just want to understand what that means, particularly where I'm slightly conflicted is when we have Chipt and Gupt also writing our actions on a preordained situation. So how does this hukam, this preordainedness, how does that work when we know at the end we do have a day of judgment that's coming for us?
The question around hukam, what is preordained, what is still to be decided. I know there are some similar questions around hukam as well, and free will and those sorts of things. I'm very encouraging for people to read Gurbani, and even if they don't understand the language, to read the English translations, until you come across where the English translations fall short. And words like preordained don't easily map with what the Guru is actually trying to say. So let me help with some of the language. When we say that is everything preordained or is life being decided right now, what is already in my destiny and what is yet to be decided? That kind of language doesn't really fit with the Guru's model. The idea that there is some book of life where everybody's story has been written and you're simply acting out your part like you're playing in a show or a play, and you're just a character in a play, and all the lines that you were ever going to say in life have already been decided and scripted. That is not how I understand the Guru's teachings. The Guru's teachings say something very amazing in the Japji Sahib. It says, Sabna likhya vudi kalam. It says that everyone's story is being written right now with an ever-flowing pen. Very poetic language. So let's break that down a little bit. How I interpret that is that life is being written as we speak. What that means is my next word or my next action hasn't been decided. It is going to be decided. It is unfolding as we speak. But what I say or do is a direct result of all the things that have already happened to me. Does that make sense? If you ask me a question, what does my mind do? It goes back into its memory bank and it tries to figure out, what have you heard before? What's your answer? How have you answered this question before? And it brings all it knows. I can only give you everything that has already happened to me is now culminating in the words that I'm saying to you. So that is my previous actions that are now impacting this current moment. And if you study your own life, you will notice that that's what happens all the time. If anybody asks you for help, the first thing you do, okay, do I know the answer to this? Oh, I've already done this before, I've done something similar. So I can try and help you the best way I know how, based on what my experience already is. So that pre-written is really just talking about your experience. All the experiences that you've had in life have led you to this moment. But that doesn't mean the next thing that's going to happen has definitely been decided, but it's massively shaped by all of your previous actions. This is how I understand this concept of pichle karam, my previous actions. People have somehow placed that in my past life. I don't know anything about my past life, but I know that if I'm going to answer a question or if I'm going to do something, most likely I'm going to act based on how all the things that have happened already, the kinds of influences that I've had, what my peers, what my family members have told me. So even if I don't know the answer, I might think about, oh, well, this is a conversation I already had. Maybe that's the right answer. You see how your past impacts your current? It doesn't mean that everything else is already decided. Otherwise, what a boring, mundane life. I imagine that even God is getting bored of a play that he's already written. But how exciting for God to sit there and watch the play as it's getting unfolded and say, I wonder what he does next.
I think, Paji, you talked about studying Gurbani, right? And when you started this morning today, I'm losing track of time. You said, I feel myself not as wise to be here, but I have studied Gurmat and kind of come to this. So I think that gives us power, and everyone sitting in this room can believe that if they invest that time to read Gurbani themselves, or wisdom from whichever sources they're coming from, or whether it be Hinduism, like Buddhism or Islam, whatever your belief is, if you read the spiritual wisdom, that could be another person. You become a beacon of light, and that kind of goes forward. So studying Gurbani, there's a question similar to that. What is your best advice for someone who's interested in studying Guru Granth Sahib? I have read and deeply understood Japji Sahib, but rest of the scripture feels a little intermediating for many reasons. For the approach, what approach do you suggest, and how can you break down the study into more of an actionable plan? That must be an engineer too, so.
Or a project manager.
Yeah, something like that.
The question is around, how do I approach studying Gurbani, and what are the steps that I can take? I can only share with you what my journey has been and how it has worked for me. For me, I say that learning Gurbani is almost like learning a new language. You have to be willing to invest the time to see how that language flows, how it works, and spend enough time understanding some of the nuances of the language. I remember when my father told me about in the 70s when he moved to a brand new country. He qualified in his qualifications in India, and he traveled to a country in Europe, Denmark specifically, and he was going to live there for a while and begin working, but clearly he didn't speak the language. And so he would go to work in the daytime, and in the evenings he would go to adult learning classes to try and learn the language. And his teacher would teach him in the classroom, but what his teacher used to say was, if you really want to know how to speak Danish, you're not going to learn it in the classroom. He said, you're going to learn it in the pub. So he says, learn here, but afterwards, when I take you to the pub, you'll notice how the language is really being used. You have to spend time with the actual people who are using the language. There's only so much you can learn in a classroom and through textbooks. So going back to the question, how would you learn Gurbani, is there is an element of you going in there and learning the language, trying to understand the meanings of the words, but then spend time with other people who are really sort of familiar with it as well. I always say the best thing when you want to master a skill is to find a mentor. Find somebody who's already a few steps ahead of you, because they will tell you some of the mistakes that they made. So having another partner who is also going down the same path. You know, sometimes now, even on these fitness apps, when you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to do a certain amount of exercise a day, you can actually nominate another person. And the other person is also doing the same fitness routine as you or the same diet routine as you. And that way there's an accountability. So studying the wisdom and then spending time with other people who are also studying the wisdom is massively beneficial for you. Now, what I did, for me, I didn't grow up learning Punjabi. I didn't grow up speaking that. That wasn't my first language. My first language was English. I think in English. So I had to go and actually figure out, how do you understand these teachings? And for me, what I used to do was, when I began learning this sort of in my early 20s, is when I would go to the office at work, I would start my day in front of the computer screen, and instead of opening up my work emails, the first thing I would do was I would open the Hukamnama of the day, which for those of you who are not familiar is sort of the spiritual reading of the text, and it's one particular verse that's sort of sent around the world and everybody can read that one verse of the day. And what I would do is I would try and string the sentences together in Punjabi the best way that I could learn it, you know, based on my Uda Era classes as a child. And so that would give me a little bit of practice of reading it. And then what I would do is a word mapping exercise. I would read the English translations, and I would try and map the words that I knew. So this word there, I know means this English word there, and this word there, I know means that. And very slowly over time, you start to build your vocabulary. And so this kind of goes back to the previous question, where ultimately you do need to actually start going into the deeper language, learn the actual wisdom, learn the actual spiritual language that's being used there, because you can learn very well around the spiritual text in English, in the language that makes sense to you, but then taking it further and trying to learn the original language, the Gurmukhi, is going to be very beneficial to you. That's one part of it. The other thing that I want to say is, do not treat this as some sort of textbook. If you're only going to read this as a philosophy book so that you can just learn the wisdom, it's going to get you nowhere. It's like reading a book on how to swim. It doesn't matter how many times you read that book. If you don't get in the swimming pool and actually start flapping your arms and legs about, you will have no idea. You could do a PhD on how to swim. And you could sit in every debate class and you can argue everyone about the science and the physics of it and the ergonomics of it all and the biology and physiology of it all. But hey, can you actually swim? No, I don't think I need to get in the pool. You have to practice this wisdom. And there are, unfortunately, a lot of people who are very well read on this, but they don't sit within themselves. They don't know their inner stillness. They haven't gone in and done the work to actually say, what is my mind doing? This book, this wisdom, this text is all about the mind. What do I actually know about my mind? Do I recognize when my mind goes into its ego? Do I recognize when anger comes, or do I just get lost in my anger? Do I know something deeper, more profound, more divine within me? If I don't, there's no point just reading it. You've got to take that extra step of learning it as well. So it's really well and good that you want to learn the language and you want to learn, but really you don't have to read the entire Guru Granth Sahib. It's not structured like a textbook. It's not structured in chapters. It's just verses of truth. The way it's structured is you could open any page and start reading, and you will get ultimate truth, divine truth. That's actually how it's structured. And very different to many other spiritual scriptures. You don't know many other scriptures where you can literally flip to any page and just immediately get immersed in ultimate truth. Each Shabad is a complete lesson in divine truth. I'm not saying don't read all of it. What I'm saying is don't treat it like a textbook that you've just got to get from start to finish. It's really a divine truth scripture. So it's part of practicing it, learning it, checking with other people. Hey, this is how I'm understanding it. Do you understand it slightly different? Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I didn't see it that way. I saw it this way. And then going back, now how does my practice change? It is really this perfect combination of wisdom, of interpretation, and practice. That's how you develop in this.
Just to aha moment, Paji, was other day we were having dinner and Paji said, I didn't grow up speaking Punjabi. I was speaking English to my parents. So if a lot of us like my age say, I don't know Punjabi, or Guru Granth Sahib is very far taught for me to read from, and if we put an effort to build a vocabulary, we can overcome a lot of we don't have to go okay, we need to do this, it's just a step by step. It's just more of Paji could do it, then all of us should also believe that.
Believe me, if I can do it, you can do it. There's nothing special about me, trust me.
If you enjoy learning spiritual teachings and you're looking to deepen your understanding, the most effective way is to learn with a group of friends. Right now, you can set up your very own Nanak Naam meetup group from the comfort of your own homes. Gather your friends, family members or colleagues and start your very own wisdom group by visiting livingwithwisdom.org. There, you'll find a range of Nanak Naam courses designed specifically for groups that you can watch together and discuss. A growing number of people have already started their very own wisdom groups, and it's having a huge positive impact on their lives. Find out how easy it is to start your own wisdom group by visiting livingwithwisdom.org.
Hello. So oftentimes in Gurbani, we hear that the Naam is the solution, but what actually is Naam? Does that mean consciously repeating a word? And if it is, then sometimes in my experience, it doesn't work in extreme situations. For example, if you just have heard about if some of your loved one died, and then you sit down and try to meditate to make yourself normal, but your awareness is not in your control. That the continuous mind is attacking you with the continuous thoughts, and you are not able to control your awareness.
It's a very important question. The question around what is Naam and how do you use it in difficult scenarios? This really is probably the most profound question. What is Naam? Naam, in its most simplest form, means the divine name. But it means so much more than that. In the tradition of Guru Nanak, Naam is the same as the flow of life. The flow of life is God's name. Let me repeat that. The flow of life is the name of God. If you can take time to try and understand the flow of life, as life is flowing, that is the way it's meant to flow. If you are able to become comfortable with the flow of life, you will start to experience Naam. Most of us are swimming against the flow of life. Life is doing one thing, but our mind thinks that life should do something else. That is when you are not in divine awareness. You're not aware of God's plan. In fact, you try to tell God what your plans are. They say that if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Your idea of what life should be like is not of any importance. Your ability to watch life as it's happening and to be okay with life as it's happening, including in difficult scenarios, that is Naam. Now, if you're able to take a word that reminds you about the flow of life, that is Naam Simran or Naam Japana. To remember the divine name or to repeat the divine name. Remember, God has no name. No name is enough to describe what this thing is. So whatever word works for you, use that name as a way to kickstart your awareness. What is the word that works for you that allows you to step away from your conflicted mind? Because that's what we all have, a conflicted mind, a mind that thinks that it knows best, a mind that doesn't seem to be happy with even the smallest situations in life, the mind that says, well, that shouldn't be happening, why isn't this happening? That's the conflict that your mind is always in. Is there a trigger word for you that snaps you out of it and says, life is flowing the way it's meant to flow and I'm okay with it? Tera kiya meetha lage, har naam padarat nanak mange. Whatever you do, I'm okay with. I'm only asking that I can repeat your name. Notice the connection? The divine name is let me be happy with whatever you're doing. Let me be happy with whatever you're doing. That is your name. Most of us have separated God's name from God's plan. We think that we have to just live our life and then somehow we have to take time out of our life to repeat God's name. And one thing I'm very clear on is Naam Simran is not God calling. You're not here simply calling God like you're trying to make a connection and say, okay, I keep dialing the number, but sometimes I connect and sometimes I don't connect. You're not connecting with something else. You're connecting with the flow of life. You can't know God. Let me be clear. You will never know God. The only way for you to know God is to know the flow of God's plan. You can know Hukam. You can't know God. God is this infinite, untouchable thing. What is it going to look like for you to know God? What is that experience? What do you do when you're doing God calling? What are you waiting for? God is happening in front of you right now. Have a name that reminds you to see life as God. That is Naam Simran. And when your Simran, your meditation, your spiritual practice is tied in with the flow of life, then that's where it will work every single time. No matter how difficult life becomes, you have a trigger word that allows you to say, this is not something that my mind needs to be in conflict with. This is something that my mind needs to recognize as the flow of life. When you relax into the flow of life and let life happen, that is Naam Simran. Tera kiya meetha lage, har naam padarat nanak mange. Let this treasure of name be the thing that you give me, you bless me with. That whatever you do, life will seem sweet to me. Naam is hukam. Be very clear on that. There is no such thing as hukam separate from Naam. Naam is hukam, hukam is Naam.
I love the aspect or the beautiful part of our practice is that this name, the snap word that you said that you can connect with could be was different for Bhagat Kabir, was different for Bhagat Namdev, was different for Guru Nanak Dev Ji. So all those like mystic saints could have a different word of connecting as long as you're basically the path is to the same final destination. Your word could be different and there's no judgment to it.
Yeah. Because they're all connecting to the same name. The unnameable name of God, they're all connecting to that. But what word they use is whatever works for you. The Guru Granth Sahib is full of names of God. There are so many names of God in Guru Granth Sahib. I say, try all of them. Which one is going to stick? Which one's going to work for you?
Hi, Satpal. My name is Ava, and I wanted to raise a question about fate and free will. You've kind of touched on this already with the preordained question, but my question is worded a little bit differently, so I'm going to let it rip. And the core question is, what do the Sikh teachings have to say about the role of fate and free will in our individual human lives? So I'm not exactly seeking like a black and white explanation of like dethroning one perspective over the other. Instead, what I'm seeking is to hear your thoughts on what do you feel best describes what the teachings, and especially the gurus, how do they relate to the topics of fate and free will? So if they were alive in flesh today, how would they speak about these things with us today? And before I give it over to you to share your thoughts, in my experience with this topic and studying Gurbani and meditating on Naam, what I've found is the teachings have a traditional, or one might say ancient, not in a bad way, perspective that is more aligned with fate. That is to say, not fate in a bad way, again, that there is a sequential order in life where some things are experienced as predetermined. That's how we're defining fate. And with that understanding, that's kind of how I found the Sikhi to speak to me. And I've also come across a YouTube video where you argued there is no free will. So all these pieces laid out, what do you have to say?
I wish I had dramatic music in the back.
I'll start by saying that you've asked an impossible question. Because you've asked me to answer as the Gurus would answer. And I cannot answer as the Gurus would answer. If you want to know the Guru's answer, you have to read the Guru's answers. You have to read it. They've laid it all out for you. I can only answer in my limited understanding. Yeah, let me be clear. I don't sit here as a Guru. I don't sit here as a wise elder. I don't sit here as anyone who knows any more than you. I sit here as someone who is so inspired by this wisdom that I'm compelled to sing and shout about it in whatever way that I can. Because it's so life-changing for me, I'm hoping that it can be life-changing for other people as well. But that doesn't mean that I can answer from the Guru's perspective. So it seems that you've looked into this question quite a lot. For me, I do not see, having studied the text in what my own limited capacity, I do not see room for free will. I do not see the Gurus talk about your own free will. But that is not to say that the Gurus do not encourage you to act. The Gurus speak to you and say, hey, why do you think like this? Why don't you do this? Why are you wasting your life in these things? Why don't you actually get up and do something more productive, something more meaningful in your life? Are they speaking to your free will? Possibly. I think they're actually speaking to your ego's delusion of free will. Notice what I'm saying? The ego's delusion of free will. Now does free will exist? For your ego, it does exist. That doesn't mean that it does exist. For me, there is absolute clarity. You cannot be free to have your own will because you're not free from God. The only way for you to have free will is if you're free from God. That's what the word free there means. I am free from God. I am separate to God. I am different. I am unique. I stand on my own two feet. I allow God to do some things, and there are some things I don't allow God to do. I'll do them myself. What does the word free will mean? I am free from God. I'm free from God's will. And what does Ikunkar tell you? You're not free from God. You have never been. The very fact that you think you are alive and separate is the ultimate problem. Your separation from God is the problem. The Guru is there to remind you that you have never been separate from God. You cannot be separate from God. You're simply deluded in the idea that you're separate from God. And as long as you're deluded in the idea that you're separate from God, you're deluded in many other ways to think that I'm free to think however I want. And I know where this question is coming from. It's like in my own head, I can think whatever I want. There's no God, there's nobody else here, there's just me. I can come up with any ideas, I can say whatever I want, I'm completely free. But let me ask you this question in a different way. Can you be free from your past? Can you be free from all the things that have led to this moment? You can? In your ignorance, you believe so. You cannot. So, this question comes up again and again. And you may have seen how I answered this question, but I'll try it one more time. Okay. If you have free will, tell me what your next thought is going to be. In fact, all of you try it. See if you can see what is your next thought going to be. Do you know what your next thought is going to be that you create? Or do you simply sit there and wait for your next thought to pop into your head? You wait. So are you the creator of your thoughts? Go ahead, create a thought. You cannot. That is one of the most profound learnings that I have taken from this, to sit there and say, go on then, create a thought. And you try, and you recognize that all you have the ability to do is wait. And you wait, and a thought comes in. The thought could be planning your next holiday. The thought could be a jam sandwich. The thought could be something about your past, or an idea about the future, or a person that you haven't thought about for 20 years. You have no idea what your next thought is going to be. But what the ego does is when that thought arises, the ego goes, I did that. Go home today and try a very simple experiment. You sit and you ask yourself, what is my next thought going to be? Do I know what my next thought is going to be? If you are blessed with the understanding that you have not ever been able to create a single thought, it will destroy your idea of free will straight away. Because all your actions are based on your thoughts. And if you never created your thoughts, then you never created the actions that came after those thoughts. Then you sit back and you go, I really don't have an ego. God really is controlling every moment of my life, so much so that I don't even know the next thought that's going to come into my head. God is not something that's happening to you. God is something that's happening through you. So the question is there an illusion of agency to abide by the higher will? So as though there's a pre-decided idea of what's going to happen, and then the ability to decide whether you're going to go with that or not. And again, it comes down to simple things. And again, this is an experiment that I do quite often, and maybe we can do that now, just as something interesting. Yeah? So, sit up straight. And close your eyes. And I'm going to throw options at you, and I want you to pick one. I don't want you to overthink it. I just want you to pick whichever option seems to be the right one. Red or blue. Don't overthink it, just pick one. Apple or orange. Don't overthink, just pick one. No context. Pen or pencil. Summer or winter? Up or down? Okay? Now we're going to try the same thing again. This time, rather than focusing on the answer, I want you to think about how does that answer get selected? Pisces or Capricorn? Cucumber or tomato? Wood or plastic? Left or right? Okay? Open your eyes. What do you notice about how those choices get made? I didn't give you any context, I just told you to pick from two random things. How do you pick between apple or orange? How does that choice get made? It was just an impulse in that moment. Where's the agency? And sometimes there's certain choices that I give where the impulse you might know, oh, I definitely don't like peanuts, I definitely like chocolate. Because that's based on all of your past experiences, oh, I might be allergic to this or that or whatever. Left or right, well, I'm left-handed, so I'm going to say left. So sometimes decisions are made based on your previous experiences. Where is the question of agency? You might think that, oh, I've picked that. That's what I'm saying. That the delusion of ownership, that I made that choice, that's literally what the ego is. The idea that you somehow have agency is actually now scientifically proven as an afterthought. The scientists are now, they've done experiments where they do something very similar, where they say, press a button, or either a red button or a blue button. And they've got you hooked up to all of these sort of wires. And what the scientists have discovered is before you're going to make a decision, they're able to already see which decision you're going to make. Because they're tapping in at a far deeper level and they're looking at the sort of impulses going on in the brain and they're saying, oh, he's going to press red. So they know, before your conscious mind even knows the answer, there's something deeper that just says, yeah, well, let's go for the red. The mind later then says, I made that choice. That's literally what the ego is this idea that I am somehow doing something. And notice when the wisdom is constantly telling you about your ego, there's a part of you that does not want to let it go. Does not want to let go of the idea that I am nothing. I'm irrelevant. I'm insignificant. The very idea that I am is an illusion. It's a God-created illusion. It's something that's just spontaneously erupted through evolution. It's just this idea that I am. And that one thing is what the masters have come down and said, this is what's going on. We've looked at human evolution and we've seen that somewhere in that entire process, this thing popped up called I am, and that's the cause of your misery. If you can let go of something which isn't actually tangible and real, you will let go of all the things that are causing you pain and grief in your life. It's literally just that. The ego is the cause of your misery, not the circumstances of life, the thing that wants life to go in its favor. When you let go of the ego, you let go of any desire for life to go your way. And if you're happy for life to go in whichever way it's going to go, where's the suffering? God is the only one that has agency. I use this word lightly. I hope you realize that when I use the word God, I'm not talking about a guy in the sky. I'm talking about life itself, the spirit of life.
I think out of all your videos, I've learned that you try not to use God in a lot, but today we end up using a lot. So I love you clarified that. And another aspect of it is that divine is getting things done through you. So sometimes I hear some spiritual beings, they're like Sajay, God got it done through me. And that's just where we switch the button that I did not do it. God, through me, did it for the universe.
Neelam here. Thank you so much for coming and blessing us. My question actually very ironically is about ego and also another word that a lot of people have started talking about, which is surrender. And my understanding of ego, if you could expand on this, if you think I'm on the right track, is when we're little children, we're just born, little babies, there's no ego. They are the closest to God and the closest thing to Waheguru. And as we, as parents, see our children growing up, we see them developing this ego. And obviously at this age, we definitely have an ego. And my understanding of surrender is how Waheguru has given us ego. We have ego for a reason, and this is because we are on this journey, on this human journey, to learn how to surrender to our ego, to come back to God, to understand what we were when we were just born. Is that the correct understanding?
The idea that we surrender to our ego is an interesting one, but it's a slightly dangerous one. Because the idea is that I'm okay with the ego as it is. And so we have to be careful, what do we mean by surrender? Because surrender could mean I am okay with the fact that an ego was created. I understand it, I accept that it's there. But then, where do you draw the line with, if I accept that it's there, then I'm also just perfectly comfortable with it being there? So we have to, again, look at what do we mean by ego. This is probably one of the most important things. Do we mean ego as my selfish, negative self? Or do we mean it as myself? The idea that I am. Which ego are we talking about? Because the ego must be understood. Remember how the ego is being described in the tradition. Homme dirag roga hai, daru bhi ismai. The ego, the myself, is the ultimate disease and the medicine. It's a beautiful teaching. The ego, the myself, is the ultimate disease, but the medicine also lies within it. Kirpa kari je apne, ta gur ka shabad kamaye. If you are lucky to learn the Guru's wisdom, if you learn the Guru's Shabad, he will show you how to look at your ego, how to know the self. So let's be clear. The word ego does not mean my selfish self. It means the idea that I am here. I am something. I am a fully living, breathing, self-independently thinking little part of the universe. That's what the ego means, that I am independently here. Yes, I was created by life, but I have a sense of independence of my own. I have free will. That's what ego means. What are you surrendering to? That is the thing that's the delusion. And the way that the wisdom explains it, it's like the wave who thinks he's separate from the ocean. I love that analogy because when you look at the waves in the ocean, it's ludicrous to think that the wave is separate from the ocean. And that's what the gurus are saying. Yeah, you're ludicrous. For you to think that you're separate from God is an absolute fallacy. So what are you surrendering to? Rather than surrendering to your ego, the Guru says surrender to the divine. Ignore your ego. Forget your ego. This is something that we haven't actually covered today. What is the mechanism by which the ego survives? What is the thing that is keeping our ego alive? It is the voice in your head. It's the voice in your head that says, I need to do this, I need to do that, I'm so important, I can't believe this hasn't happened in my life, that. It's this, what I call me thinking. Me thinking is the ego. I hope I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. What is your ego? Your ego is this constant noise in your head that goes, me, 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 me. Are you going to surrender to that? Is that what you're surrendering to? The Guru is saying, this is what your mind is doing anyway. Your mind is meditating on a mantra all day, every day. And the mantra is me, me, me. And the Guru says, if your mind is going to be saying that all day, and that's the cause of your misery, then rather than saying me, 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 I'm going to give you a different word. And he takes away this word me, this me thinking, and he replaces it with you. And rather than making your entire life about me, 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 you switch everything and you label everything as you. Oh, divine, this is you, this is you, this is you, this is you. This scenario is you. This traffic today is you. When I opened the jar and there was no jam left, that's you. And when I go to the grocery store and there's a big line and I have to wait at the back of the queue, that's you. Notice that your mind doesn't do that. Your mind is constantly, oh, I can't believe this person finished the jam. I can't believe there's such a long line. Why don't they open more tills? Like, your mind is always trying to do that. And that's the way that your ego survives. So the Guru says, if you can relabel everything rather than thinking about me, relabel everything as the act of God. Can you see the hand of God and then surrender? That is what surrender means, that I surrender the idea that life has to go my way, and I just see the hand of God in everything. Yeah?
But just a profound thing that I noticed is another thing that, let's say if you read just one line, you say, Home dheeraj rog hai. We would read that and we're like, yeah, this is it. If you don't go to the next line, that just changes the interpretation completely. So I think that's one thing where we have failed at, because we haven't read Guru Granth Sahib ourselves. We're basically going to understand it based on just one line. Like, Jo mange Thakur apne se soi soi de. We're reading that, but we're not reading the next line, that you have to be at that divine level, like to connect to that divine level, to be getting all that bliss. So I think that's just a really, such a deep part of our this.
Yeah, we take the context that makes sense for our ego, and that's it. We stick with that.
Yeah, another thing, Baji, that my question might add in is that religious could also be in a form of religious ego, or in a part of other egos in different sects. And one of the places I read, or from a Kathavachak I understood, is that religious ego is the highest form of ego. So I know some people that have done, like they've been doing parts, and they've done 100 Sukhni Sahibs and do Ardas, I've done like this much or whatnot, but there's still ego in them. You can see that I have done this or whatnot. So how do you, like, when you, sometimes we see some people who are older, they might have that, and our institutions as well. How do you, like, if I'm on the other end, how do you calm your mind on that situation?
I learned a wonderful lesson, which is when you see people acting negatively, thank them, because that's a lesson for you, showing you how you shouldn't be. Otherwise, what we naturally do is we judge them. And the Guru's wisdom is very clear on being vigilant against judgment. It says, be very careful, never judge anyone. Because when you see someone who's not acting in the right way, your mind judges them. What you're really saying is, at least I'm not like that. And
your ego is making it like yourself bigger subconsciously, that I would never do that.
At least I'm not like that.
I'm not like that.
Yeah.
So then you're saying I am better.
I'm better.
And that's what in India is, that they're doing this, but I would never do that.
Yeah, so we don't recognize that bit. We think we're rightly just calling out people who are acting in the wrong way. And so look how terrible that person is. But the Guru's saying, don't ever do that. Because you yourself then are subconsciously lifting your own ego up. So it says, always put yourself low. Put yourself low. I'm nothing. I'm no one. Like, your entire process is around this idea that I am someone special. It says, no, that's the thing. And remember why, I really want to be clear on why we're talking about ego so much. Because ego is the thing that has caused you more misery than anything else in life. Your ego is the cause of your misery. It's because you don't know that you are divine. You don't know who you really are. Otherwise, this just becomes a nice kind of philosophical discussion. Oh, the ego, divine, do we have free will, all those things. No, this is real. This has real practical implications. Your misery is caused by this one thing, myself. That's the ultimate truth. That is why it is a cancer in your life. It is a disease in your life, the ultimate disease. We're all diseased with this thing called ego. The worst disease is the thing that is called myself. But we don't see ourselves as a disease. We don't see this as disease. We think, oh, I quite like my ego. Oh, I'm better than that person. That's why judgment is so important to be clear on.
Well, you might be able to confirm this, but what I heard from one of the Maskeen ji had this in this katha, that all the gurus, all in Guru Granth Sahib itself, nothing is talked more other than ego in context of, like, gurus and Kabir and everyone have talked about ego consistently throughout Guru Granth Sahib. Is that true? Or?
Yeah, and it uses the word mind quite a lot to mean the ego mind.
So our Guru Granth Sahib is teaching that mind. That's just the biggest core,
Yeah.
and that's just what's been talked.
It really is a manual of the mind. The Guru Granth Sahib really is a manual of the mind.